The research vessel Sunrise moved slowly through the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean. It was the year 2087, and the ship carried some of the best scientists in Korea. They were looking for something ordinary. They found something that would change human history forever. Dr. Park stood on the bridge watching the monitors with tired eyes. He was 42 years old with gray hair at his temples and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. For 20 years he had studied the ocean floor. He had seen many strange things, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. "Sir, the sonar is showing something unusual," said a young technician. Walked over to the screen. At first he thought it was a rock formation. The trench was full of strange shapes. But as the image became clearer, his heart began to beat faster. The shape was too perfect, too geometric. Nature did not make straight lines like that. "Take us closer," he said quietly. Lieutenant stood beside him. She was 35, with sharp eyes and a serious face. The Navy had sent her to protect the mission. She did not understand science, but she understood danger. And right now, every instinct in her body was screaming that something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know," admitted, "but it's big, very big." They sent down a drone first. The small robot sank through 11 kilometers of black water, its lights cutting through the darkness like tiny stars. On the ship above, everyone gathered around the screens to watch. Dr. Lee pushed his way to the front. He was the team's marine biologist, a friendly man with a round face and curious eyes. He spent most of his time studying fish and underwater plants, but what appeared on the screen was not alive. It was a ship. The vessel was enormous, at least 800 meters long. It lay half buried in the ocean floor, covered in sediment and strange coral, but its shape was unmistakable. This was not a natural formation. This was something built by intelligent hands. "That's impossible," whispered. Engineer was already taking measurements. She was the youngest member of the team, only 29, but she was a genius with machines and numbers. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as she analyzed the data. "The materials don't match anything in our database," she said, "and according to the sediment layers," she stopped, checking her calculations twice. "This thing has been here for at least 65 million years." The room fell silent. 65 million years. That was before humans existed, before most modern animals existed. Something had built a spaceship and crashed it on Earth when dinosaurs still walked the land. Felt his legs go weak. He sat down heavily in a chair and stared at the screen. His whole life he had believed they were alone in the universe. Now that belief lay shattered at the bottom of the ocean. "We need to report this," said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "The government needs to know." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Korean government sent more ships, more scientists, more soldiers. They established a perimeter around the site and built an underwater research station. They called it Project Sunrise, named after the ship that had made the discovery. News of the find was kept secret, but secrets are hard to keep. Other nations detected the unusual activity. American satellites photographed the fleet of ships. Chinese submarines tried to get closer. Russian spies intercepted communications. The world's governments began to whisper among themselves about what Korea had found. Did not care about politics, he cared only about understanding the ship. Every day he studied the images from the drones. Every night he dreamed about what might be inside. "We need to go down there," he told the mission commander one evening. "The drones can only show us so much. We need human eyes on that ship." The commander was reluctant. The pressure at that depth would crush an ordinary submarine like a paper cup, but had been working on a solution. She had designed a new type of diving suit, reinforced with materials borrowed from the alien ship's hull. "It will work," she promised. "I've tested it 100 times." Volunteered to be part of the first team. She did not fully understand what they had found, but she knew it was important. Important enough to risk her life for. The descent took 3 hours. Watched from the research station, his heart pounding with every meter they traveled. The pressure readouts climbed higher and higher. The temperature dropped until it was near freezing, but the suits held. When the team finally reached the ship, heard gasp over the radio. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The alien vessel was covered in strange patterns like frozen waves or flowing water. There was writing on the hull, symbols that no human had ever seen before. The metal, if it was metal, seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. Reached out and touched the surface. "It's warm," he said in surprise. "After 65 million years, it's still warm." That was when the lights came on. One by one, panels along the ship's hull began to glow with soft blue light. The patterns on the surface started to move, flowing like liquid. A low hum filled the water, vibrating through their suits. "Get out of there," shouted into the radio. "Everyone retreat." But it was too late. A door appeared in the ship's side, sliding open with perfect silence. Beyond it was a corridor filled with the same blue light. It was an invitation. After 65 million years of sleep, the ship had woken up. Stood at the entrance, her heart racing. She knew she should run. Every training exercise, every survival instinct told her to get away from the unknown, but something held her in place, a feeling she could not explain. The ship was waiting for them. It had been waiting for a very long time. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Behind her, the door remained open. The blue light spilled out into the dark ocean like a beacon. Above, on the research station, watched the video feed with wide eyes. He did not know what they would find inside the ancient vessel. He did not know that this moment would change everything. But he knew with absolute certainty that humanity would never be the same. The discovery had been made. Now the real work would begin. 3 months had passed since Lieutenant first stepped inside the alien ship. In that time, the underwater research station had grown into a small city. Scientists from around the world worked in shifts, studying every inch of the ancient vessel. But no one was prepared for what they found on the day they opened the inner chambers. Dr. Park led the team personally. He had finally come down to see the ship with his own eyes. The pressure suits felt heavy and awkward, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused entirely on the corridor ahead. The atmosphere inside is breathable, reported Dr. Hansora, the team's physicist. She was a tall woman with serious eyes and a habit of talking to herself when she was thinking. The life support systems activated when Lieutenant entered. They're still running perfectly after 65 million years. How is that possible? Asked. I don't know, she admitted. Their power source is beyond anything I understand. It seems to generate energy from nothing, as if it's pulling power from space itself. They walked deeper into the ship. The blue lights guided their path, always staying just bright enough to see. The walls were covered in the same flowing patterns they had seen outside. Sometimes the patterns seemed to form pictures, but they moved too fast to understand. Doctor walked beside them, recording everything on her camera. She was 33, a linguist who had spent her career breaking codes and translating dead languages. Now she faced a language that had never been spoken on Earth. The symbols repeat in patterns, she murmured. There's a logic to them. Given enough time, I think I can figure out what they mean. Engineer was examining the walls with her instruments. The whole ship is like one giant computer, she said. Every surface can display information or respond to touch. It's incredible. They reached a large circular door. Unlike the others, this one did not open automatically. There were symbols around its edge glowing with faint red light. A warning, guessed. Her hand rested on the weapon at her side. Even after 3 months, she never relaxed inside the alien ship. Studied the symbols carefully. I think it's a lock, but not to keep people out. She traced the patterns with her finger. It's to keep something safe. Found a control panel nearby. After a few minutes of work, the red lights turned blue. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The chamber beyond was enormous. It stretched upward into darkness, filled with rows of strange objects that looked like standing beds. Each one was made of clear crystal, and inside each crystal was a body. Felt his breath catch in his throat. He was looking at aliens, real aliens, beings from another world. They were tall and thin, with long limbs and elongated skulls. Their skin was pale gray, almost silver. They had large eyes, closed now in death, and delicate hands with too many fingers. They wore clothing that looked like flowing water, frozen in place. They're all dead, said softly. He had joined them for this mission, unable to stay away. As a biologist, this was the discovery of a lifetime. Every single one of them, but they're perfectly preserved. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All standing in their crystal cases, all peaceful, as if they had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. Sora scanned one of the bodies with her instruments. No signs of violence, no disease that I can detect, they just stopped. Like they chose to die, asked. Or they ran out of times. They found the bridge of the ship an hour later. It was smaller than had expected, designed for maybe 20 crew members. The control panels were covered in dust, but the screens still glowed with soft light. Approached one of the panels. The moment her fingers touched it, the entire room came to life. Screens lit up everywhere, star maps appeared on the walls. Strange music filled the air, beautiful and sad, and in the center of the room a figure appeared. It was a hologram, a recording of one of the aliens. This one looked different from the others, older perhaps, with lines on its face and a heaviness in its posture. It spoke in a language no human could understand, but its tone was clear. This was a message of farewell. Can you translate it? Asked. Not yet, but I'm recording everything. Give me time. The hologram continued speaking for several minutes. It pointed to different star maps tracing a path across the galaxy. Then it pointed to a small blue dot on one of the screens, Earth. "They came here on purpose," said Sora. "This wasn't an accident, they were heading specifically for our planet." The hologram's next gesture made everyone gasp. It pointed to a large chamber in the center of the ship shown as a diagram on one of the screens. Then it pointed to Earth again, then to itself. "It's saying they brought something here," said, "something from their ship to our planet." The message ended, the hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving them in silence. "Was already working on another control panel. I'm accessing their medical database," she said. "I want to know more about their biology." The information that appeared on the screen changed everything. "This is impossible," whispered. He was staring at a comparison chart. On one side was the alien genetic code, on the other was human DNA. 47% compatibility. Their genetics and ours are almost half the same. "What does that mean?" asked. Understood, he felt cold despite his heated suit. "It means we're related to them. Somehow, in some way we don't understand, humans and these aliens share a common ancestor." "Or they created us," said Sora quietly. No one wanted to believe it. The idea was too big, too frightening, but the evidence was right in front of them. The aliens had not come to Earth by accident, they had come with a purpose, and that purpose had something to do with humanity itself. Was still studying the hologram recording. "There's more to the message," she said. He wasn't just saying goodbye, he was giving instructions, warnings. "Warnings about what?" "I don't know yet, but look at his face. He's afraid. Whatever these beings were running from, whatever made them crash on Earth and die in their crystal coffins, it scared them more than death itself." The team spent the next several days exploring the ship. They found living quarters filled with personal items. They found libraries containing millions of documents. They found a medical bay with equipment that could heal injuries in seconds. But they did not open the central chamber, not yet. That door remained sealed, waiting for them to understand what they had found. On the seventh day, finally cracked the alien language. "I have the translation," she announced, her voice was shaking. "The hologram, the captain's final message, I know what it says." Everyone gathered around her. The underwater research station felt very small suddenly, very fragile, floating above the ancient ship like a soap bubble. "They called themselves the Architects," began. "They were the oldest civilization in the galaxy. They had lived for millions of years spreading across the stars, but something was hunting them, something they called the Hollow." She paused, reading from her notes. "The Hollow consumed everything, not just lives but minds, memories, consciousness itself. The architects fought back, but they could not win, so they ran, and as they ran, they planted seeds." "Seeds?" asked. "Life, they created life on barren worlds, new civilizations that would grow after they were gone. Earth was one of those worlds, we are one of those seeds." The room was completely silent. "The captain's message was a warning," continued. "He said, our children will succeed where we failed. Humanity is not our legacy, humanity is our hope." And then he pointed to the central chamber. "That's where the answers are, that's where we'll find out exactly what they gave us." Looked at the screens showing the alien ship below. 65 million years ago, dying visitors from the stars had created humanity. They had given everything they had to bring humans into existence. Now it was time to find out why. And somewhere in the darkness of space knew the thing that had destroyed the architects was still out there, waiting. The central chamber had remained sealed for 65 million years. Now Dr. Park stood before its massive doors, his heart beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. Behind him, his team waited in nervous silence. They all knew that whatever was inside would answer the biggest question in human history. "Open it," said. Engineer pressed her palm against the control panel. The doors recognized her touch, as if the ship had learned to accept human hands. Slowly, with a sound like distant thunder, the great doors began to move. The chamber beyond was vast. It rose upward like a cathedral, disappearing into darkness far above their heads. Blue lights lined the walls, but they were dim, as if the power here had been sleeping longer than anywhere else on the ship. And in the center of the room stood thousands of pods. They were arranged in perfect circles, row after row of crystal containers just large enough to hold a human body. But these pods were empty. Whatever they had once contained was long gone. Dr. Lee approached one of the pods with his instruments. "There's residue inside," he said. "Organic material, very old, but I can still analyze it." As he worked, Doctor explored the walls of the chamber. There were more symbols here than anywhere else on the ship. Entire stories written in the flowing alien language. "This is their most sacred space," she murmured. They recorded everything here, their history, their mission, their hopes. Lieutenant stood guard at the door watching the shadows. She did not like this place. It felt like a tomb, a very beautiful, very ancient tomb. His instrument beeped. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then slowly sat down on the floor. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" asked. "The residue in the pods, it's proto-human genetic material." His voice was barely a whisper. "These containers held the seeds of human life. The architects grew us here in this room and then released us onto Earth." The weight of his words settled over the team like a heavy blanket. For a moment, no one could speak. They were standing in the room where humanity had been created, the womb of their entire species. Dr. Hansora was examining the equipment around the pods. "This technology is incredible," she said. "They could design life itself, choose every gene, every trait. They built us like engineers build machines." "Not exactly like machines," said. She had found a section of wall covered in what looked like notes. "The architects believed in something they called the spark. It's hard to translate, but I think it means soul, consciousness. They could build bodies, but they believed the spark came from somewhere else, somewhere beyond their science. So they gave us bodies," said, "but something else gave us minds." "That's what they believed." Was working on a large control panel in the center of the room. Suddenly, screens lit up all around them. Star maps appeared, showing the entire galaxy. 12 points were highlighted in bright gold. "Seeded worlds," translated. "Earth is one of 12 planets where the architects planted life. There are 11 other civilizations out there, our brothers and sisters." The idea was overwhelming. Humanity was not alone, had never been alone. Somewhere across the vastness of space, other species had grown from the same seeds. Other children of the architects, wondering about their origins just like humans were now. Sora pointed to another part of the display. "This is their root," she said. "The architects came from a galaxy far away. They were running from something, running for thousands of years." The Hollow said she had been quiet, but she had been listening. "The thing that hunted them." Nodded. "I found more about them in the records. The Hollow are not a species, they're a force, like a disease that infects minds instead of bodies. They consume consciousness, absorb memories and personalities into themselves. Every civilization they destroy makes them stronger." "Why?" asked. "What do they want?" "They want everything. They want to be the only minds in the universe. They can't create, so they take, and they never stop." Had found something else in the database. The architects knew they couldn't defeat the Hollow. They had fought for millions of years and always lost, so they changed their strategy. Instead of fighting, they ran, and they planted seeds everywhere they went. "They were trying to create something that could survive," said Sora. "Something different from themselves." "Us," said. "They were trying to create us." Pulled up more records. The architects were brilliant, but they had weaknesses. Their minds worked in straight lines. They could see a problem and design a solution, but they couldn't imagine, they couldn't dream, they couldn't do the unexpected. "And they thought humans could?" asked. "They hoped we could. That's why they mixed their genes with something else, something wild. They gave us their intelligence but kept us unpredictable. They made us creative." The ship suddenly hummed with new energy. More screens lit up, showing technical diagrams, mathematical equations, blueprints for machines that human science could not begin to understand. "What is this?" asked, her eyes wide. "Their gift," said. "Everything they knew, every piece of technology they ever created. They left it all here for us to find." Sora was already reading the first files. Faster than light travel, clean energy sources, medical technology that could cure any disease, this is everything. This is their entire civilization compressed into a database. "They knew we would need it," said. "They knew the Hollow would come eventually. They wanted us to be ready." As they explored the database, noticed something strange. A red warning light was blinking on one of the control panels. She approached it carefully. "There's a beacon here," she said. "It was dormant, but it activated when we opened this chamber." Was instantly alert. "Activated how? Is it sending a signal?" Studied the readings. Her face went pale. "It's been transmitting for the past hour, sending our location out into space." "Shut it down," ordered. "I can't. It's hardwired into the ship's systems. The architects designed it this way. When someone opened this chamber and accessed their technology, the beacon would automatically send a message." "A message to who?" asked. No one wanted to answer that question, but they all knew. The beacon was old, built during a time of war. It was not sending a message to friends. "The Hollow," said quietly. "The architects wanted to make sure that if anyone found their technology, the Hollow would know about it. They wanted us to have a reason to fight." "That's insane," said. "They led the enemy right to us." "No," said Sora. She was still reading the database, her expression thoughtful. They gave us motivation. The architects knew that without danger, civilizations become lazy, they don't push themselves, they don't grow. By alerting the Hollow to our existence, they made sure we would have to develop quickly. 65 million years of peace, said, and now it's over. He looked around the chamber at the empty pods and the glowing screens. The architects had given humanity everything they needed: knowledge, technology, and a warning. Now it was up to humans to decide what to do with those gifts. We need to tell the world, he said. Everything we've found, everything we've learned, no more secrets. If the Hollow are coming, then every person on Earth deserves to know. Nodded, and we need to start building. Ships, weapons, defenses, whatever it takes. Can we even understand this technology? Asked. Smiled for the first time in hours. I already understand some of it. The architects thought in straight lines, remember, but I don't. Give me a year with this database and I'll build things that would make them jealous. They left the central chamber as the first rays of simulated morning light filled the research station above. Behind them, the ancient ship continued to glow. Its creators were long dead, but their hope lived on. Humanity had been a seed planted in the darkness of prehistoric Earth. Now that seed had grown, and it was about to face the storm that had destroyed its creators. The beacon pulsed steadily, sending its message across the stars. Somewhere in the void, something was listening. And something was already on its way. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Every television channel, every website, every phone in the world showed the same images: an alien ship at the bottom of the ocean, bodies preserved in crystal, star maps pointing to distant worlds, and the message that humanity had been created by ancient visitors from the stars. At first, there was panic. People ran into the streets crying and praying. Governments declared states of emergency. Stock markets crashed, churches filled with seeking answers. But then something unexpected happened. People started talking to each other. Old enemies set aside their differences. Nations that had fought for centuries began to cooperate. Scientists from every country demanded access to the architect technology. Military leaders started planning together instead of against each other. Dr. Park watched it all from the research station, now grown into a massive underwater complex. He had become the face of the discovery, the man who had first seen the alien ship. Journalists called him constantly. World leaders asked for his advice. He was tired and overwhelmed, but he could not stop now. Director arrived at the station on a cold morning in March. She was 55 years old, a diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between nations. Now she had the most important job in human history, leading the Global Unity Council, the new organization created to prepare Earth for what was coming. Dr. Park, she said, shaking his hand firmly, I've read your reports. You believe we have 18 months. Maybe less, admitted. Our astronomers detected an object entering the solar system last week. It matches the descriptions of Hollow vessels from the architect records. One ship. One scout. The Hollow always sends scouts first. They watch, they learn, and then they call for more. Nodded, her face calm despite the terrible news. Then we have 18 months to build a fleet, train crews, and prepare for a battle against an enemy we've never seen. That's correct. Then we'd better get started. The next few months were the busiest in human history. Factories around the world stopped making cars and phones and started making ship components. Universities trained engineers in architect technology. Soldiers volunteered for the new Space Defense Force. Engineer led the technology team. She had barely slept since they opened the central chamber. Every day brought new discoveries, new possibilities. The architect database contained millions of files, and each one was a treasure. Their engine design uses something called fold space, she explained to a room full of engineers. Instead of traveling through normal space, the ship folds the space around it. 2 points become 1 point and you simply step across. Is that possible? Asked a young engineer named. He was only 26, but he had already solved 3 problems that had stumped older scientists. Liked him immediately. The architects did it for millions of years, she said. Their math works perfectly, we just need to build the equipment. Lieutenant led the military training programs. She had been promoted to captain, then to commander. Now she was general, responsible for all space combat forces. The Hollow don't fight like us, she told her officers. They don't use tactics or strategy, they adapt. They learn from every mistake, every battle. You cannot beat them by doing the same thing twice. Then how do we beat them? Asked one of her trainees. By being unpredictable, by doing things they cannot expect. The architects lost because they thought in straight lines. We need to think in circles, in spirals, in shapes that haven't been invented yet. Doctor continued her translation work. Every day, she learned more about the architects and their long war against the Hollow. They fought for 2 million years, she told one evening. 2 million years of running, fighting, dying. They colonized 10,000 worlds and lost them all. The Hollow just kept coming. Did they ever win a battle? Yes, many times, but victory only delayed the inevitable. The Hollow learned from every defeat. They adapted their ships, their tactics, their weapons. Eventually, they became unstoppable. Then what chance do we have? Smiled, it was a small smile but genuine. The architects left a hidden file in the database. It took me weeks to find it. They wrote it specifically for whoever discovered their ship. She pulled up the translation on her tablet. Our children will have what we lacked. The Hollow cannot understand chaos. They cannot predict creativity. They cannot consume what surprises them. We were builders, our children are dreamers, that is their greatest weapon. Read the words several times, they believed in us. They staked everything on us. Their entire civilization, their hope for the future. They put it all in our hands and trusted that we would find a way to win. Dr. Hansora made the breakthrough that changed everything. She had been studying the architect weapons, trying to understand their physics. One night, she called the entire team to her lab. I found something, she said, her eyes were bright with excitement. The architects had powerful weapons, but they were limited by their thinking. They could only imagine weapons that did one thing at a time: destroy, defend, attack. And you found something different, asked. I found a possibility they never considered, Sora pointed to her calculations. Using their technology, we can create a field that affects probability itself. We can make unlikely things become likely. We can introduce randomness directly into battle. Explain that in simple terms, said. Imagine you're fighting an enemy who predicts your every move. With this field, your moves become unpredictable. Not because you're choosing random actions, but because the universe itself becomes random around you. Your bullets might curve in impossible ways. Your ship might suddenly be in a different place than expected. Chaos becomes your weapon. Can we build it? Asked. And I have been working on a prototype. We think we can have it ready in 3 months. The first human starship launched 6 months after the discovery went public. It was called Hope, and it was small and simple compared to the architect vessel. But it worked. It folded space and traveled to Mars in 7 seconds. The world watched and cheered. For the first time, humanity was not just waiting for the enemy. They were preparing to meet it. More ships followed. Each one was better than the last. Improved the engine design, making it 40% more efficient than the original architect version. Developed weapons systems that even the ancient aliens had never imagined. Sora's probability field was installed on every vessel. By the time the Hollow Scout entered the inner solar system, humanity had 12 ships ready. 12 vessels crewed by brave men and women from every nation on Earth. Stood on the bridge of the flagship, renamed Sunrise Legacy in honor of the research vessel that had started everything. He was not a military commander, but everyone agreed he should be there. This was his discovery, his responsibility. The Hollow vessel is approaching, reported the sensors officer. On the screens, they could see it for the first time, the enemy that had destroyed the architects, the consumer of civilizations. It was beautiful and terrible. A ship made of living darkness, absorbing the light around it like a black hole. It moved without engines, as if swimming through space itself. And it was enormous, 10 times the size of anything humanity had built. All ships report status, said over the fleet communication channel. 12 voices responded, 12 ships ready to fight. Looked at the crew around him. Scientists and soldiers, engineers and pilots, people who had trained for only a year to face an enemy that had been killing for millions. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. The architects believed we could win, he said quietly. They gave us their knowledge, their technology, their hope. Now it's time to prove them right. The Hollow vessel grew larger on the screens. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. The Hollow ship hung in space like a wound in reality. It was darker than the void around it, a shape that seemed to devour light itself. Dr. Park stared at it from the bridge of the Sunrise Legacy, feeling a cold terror he had never known before. This was the enemy that had destroyed the architects. This was what had ended a civilization of billions. All ships hold position, ordered General. Her voice was steady despite the fear everyone felt. Do not engage until we understand what we're facing. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The Hollow vessel simply watched them, as if studying these strange new creatures who dared to challenge it. Then it attacked. Black tendrils of energy shot from the ship, moving faster than anything natural. 3 human vessels were hit before anyone could react. Their shields flickered and failed. Their lights went dark. Their crews screamed. Evasive action shouted break formation. The remaining ships scattered, but the hollow was everywhere at once. Its tendrils seemed to know where each vessel would move before it moved. Every dodge, every turn, every strategy was anticipated and countered. On the bridge of the Sunrise Legacy watched in horror as another ship exploded. These were his colleagues, his friends, people who had worked beside him for the past year. Now they were dying, consumed by an enemy they could not defeat. Our weapons aren't working, reported engineer from her station. Their hull adapts to everything we throw at it. Lasers, missiles, plasma bursts, it just absorbs them all. What about Dr. Sora's probability field? Asked. We haven't activated it yet, we were saving it for. Activate it now. His fingers flew across his console. The prototype device hummed to life, sending invisible waves of probability distortion across the battlefield. For a moment, nothing seemed different. Then the Hollow's attack missed. Its tendrils reached for the Sunrise Legacy and curved away at the last second, striking empty space. The ship that should have been destroyed was suddenly somewhere else, in a position no one had commanded. It's working, breathed Sora. She was watching the sensor readings with wide eyes. The field is making our movements unpredictable. The Hollow can't anticipate what we'll do. The other ships activated their own probability fields. Suddenly, the battle changed. Human vessels appeared and disappeared in random locations. Weapons fired in impossible directions and curved toward their targets. Chaos erupted across the battlefield. The Hollow seemed confused. For the first time in millions of years, it faced an enemy it could not predict. Its attacks became wild, unfocused. Its adaptations failed because there was no pattern to adapt to. All ships concentrate fire on the center of the enemy vessel, ordered, use everything you have. 9 remaining ships formed up and unleashed their weapons. Lasers and missiles and plasma bursts struck the Hollow in a coordinated assault, but they did not fire at the same spot twice. Each attack came from a different angle, with different timing, using different power levels. The Hollow tried to adapt. Its hull shifted and changed, forming defenses against one attack type, but by the time it adapted, the humans were using something else. Randomness was their armor, chaos was their sword. On the bridge had an idea. He said, can you overload the probability field, make it even more chaotic? I could, but it might affect us too. We wouldn't be able to control our own ship. Do it anyways. Looked at him with surprise. That's insane. The architects lost because they always needed control. They couldn't accept chaos, but we can. We've been living with chaos our entire existence. War, disease, disaster. Humans survive because we adapt to anything. Hesitated for only a moment. Then she pushed her controls to maximum. The probability field exploded outward, washing over both fleets like a tidal wave. Reality itself seemed to bend. Ships appeared in impossible locations. Weapons fired backward and still hit their targets. The laws of physics became suggestions instead of rules. The Hollow screamed. It was not a sound anyone could hear with their ears. It was a vibration in the mind, a psychic wail of confusion and terror. For the first time in its endless existence, the Hollow faced something it could not understand, pure, uncontrolled chaos. Its hull began to crack. Light appeared in the darkness, thin lines of white cutting through the black. The tendrils stopped moving, the attack stopped completely. Now shouted everything we have right now. 9 ships fired every weapon they possessed, not in a coordinated assault but in a random barrage. Each crew made their own decisions, followed their own instincts. There was no plan, no strategy, no order. And it worked. The Hollow vessel shattered. Light poured from its core as the ancient darkness finally failed. Pieces of the ship scattered across space, dissolving into nothing as they flew. The consumer of civilizations, the destroyer of the architects, was gone. The human fleet floated in silence. No one could believe what they had done. 3 ships were lost, their crews dead. But 9 remained. 9 ships crewed by humans who had done what no other species in the history of the galaxy had ever accomplished. They had defeated the Hollow. In the hours that followed, the celebration began. People on Earth danced in the streets, wept with relief, held each other, and gave thanks for their survival. The news spread across the world. Humanity had won its first battle against the darkness. But knew this was only the beginning. The Hollow sent a transmission before it died, he told the other leaders. It called for help, more will come. How many? Asked directors. We don't know, but we bought ourselves time. Time to build more ships. Time to develop better weapons. Time to find our brothers and sisters on the other seeded worlds. Doctor had translated the last of the architect records. There are 11 other civilizations out there, she said. 11 species created by the architects growing on distant planets. Some might be more advanced than us, some might still be primitive, but they're all family. Then we need to find them, said, we need to warn them about the Hollow, and maybe together we can finally end this war. 1 year later, the first exploration fleet launched from Earth orbit. 12 ships, each carrying scientists and diplomats and soldiers, headed toward the nearest seeded world. Dr. Park was on the lead vessel, ready to meet humanity's siblings for the first time. Before they left, he gave a speech that was broadcast to every corner of Earth. We were made to survive, he said. The architects created us because they believed we had something they lacked. Creativity, adaptability, the ability to thrive in chaos. They were right. We proved it when we defeated the Hollow Scout. But survival is not enough. We cannot simply hide and hope the darkness passes us by. Today, we take the first step toward our destiny. We go to find our family among the stars. We go to build alliances and share knowledge. We go to prepare for the war that is coming. The architects gave us life. Now we will give them victory, not for ourselves, but for every civilization the Hollow has destroyed, for every world they consumed, for every mind they erased. We will be their revenge and their redemption. We are humanity, we are the unyielding ones, and we will never stop fighting. The ships folded space and vanished, carrying human hopes across the galaxy. Behind them, Earth continued to spin. A small blue world that had sheltered humanity for 65 million years. A seed that had grown into something the architects had only dreamed of. And in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the ancient ship still glowed. Its work was finally complete. Its children were finally ready. The stars awaited, and humanity was coming.